Mud everywhere, grown adults screaming like it's the 4th of July.
Challenges will be tougher than ever.
Come on, come on, come on!
Beer coolers flying across a beach while stone cold Steve Austin barks motivational threats like a Southern drill sergeant with a sponsorship deal. This wasn't a deleted scene from Jackass, this was Redneck Island. When CMT launched the show in 2012, it took the strategic survival drama of Survivor, drowned it in cheap beer, wrapped it in camouflage, and sold it as a proud celebration of real America. A group of self-proclaimed rednecks competing in outrageous challenges for $100,000.
What she doesn't understand is that I'm a competitor.
Sorry.
Man down!
Openly embracing the label that television had spent decades turning into a joke. The network framed it as fun, empowering, and self-aware. Finally, rural America wasn't just the punchline anymore, but the main event, with everyday people showing off their toughness, their humor, and their so-called backwoods skills on national television.
Look around, there's only 8 people here. It's easy to get amped up now. The end is in sight.
For a brief moment, it genuinely connected with audiences who felt overlooked by glossy reality shows full of celebrities and influencers. But beneath the party atmosphere, the patriotic branding, and the nonstop jokes, Redneck Island was quietly turning culture into a cartoon, pushing stereotypes further for shock value, and riding a reality TV trend that was already starting to wear thin.
Cody, that's in the line for you. Got a winner, Nicole.
What began as a goofy celebration would slowly reveal itself as another example of how fast television burns through ideas, people, and entire communities for entertainment. A loud, muddy experiment that almost worked, before disappearing just as quickly as it arrived. To understand why Redneck Island even existed, you have to look at the early 2010s, when reality television suddenly fell in love with rural America. For years, the genre had been dominated by rich families.
It's not only safe, but guaranteed a spot in the final battle to win $100,000.
Glamorous lifestyles, and overproduced drama, until shows like Duck Dynasty and Swamp People proved that audiences were just as interested in beards, bayous, and backwoods life as they were in Hollywood mansions. Networks quickly realized there was a massive audience that barely saw itself represented on screen. Small towns, southern communities, and everyday working class viewers finally had reality stars who looked and talked like them.
Grown-ass men running around, drunk as bare-ass farting. I'm tired of it.
CMT leaned into that wave harder than almost anyone. Originally a country music channel, CMT began building an entire lineup around down-home reality, filling its schedule with shows about redneck weddings, wild parties, and rural lifestyles that embraced chaos, humor, and exaggerated personalities. Redneck Island launched in 2012 as their biggest experiment. Hosted by Stone Cold Steve Austin, it borrowed the Survivor formula but replaced strategy with spectacle.
On the challenge today, we're throwing in Josh and Katie. He's a big, strong competitor, so is she, so we're ready to take him out.
Teams competed in muddy, beer-soaked challenges, voted each other off with something literally called the beer ballot, and fought their way toward a $100,000 prize. The focus wasn't clever gameplay. It was big stunts, loud personalities, and endless shock value.
Challenge.
Yeah, just throw me in the pit.
I'm gonna keep that in mind if I win.
Y'all can all kiss my white tank ass.
For a while, it was a hit. CMT promoted the show heavily, even premiering seasons after major events like the CMT Music Awards, and by its 3rd season, it had become one of the network's flagship series. The producers kept tweaking the format, moving locations, adding co-hosts, and bringing back veteran contestants to keep things fresh, even accidentally launching future country star Riley Green along the way. Redneck Island perfectly captured a moment when redneck reality wasn't just popular.
To yourselves, you'll be dragging this rope through the walls, over and under the different sections of the bridge.
It was the trend, but trends don't last forever. And once the novelty started fading, the cracks were impossible to ignore. At first, Redneck Island felt like harmless chaos. It was loud, ridiculous, and so exaggerated that it almost came across as self-aware comedy. Contestants laughed at themselves, Steve Austin played the tough but oddly wholesome host, and the show leaned so hard into over-the-top behavior that many viewers assumed it was all part of the joke.
Automatically up for elimination, and the winning team chooses another team to face off in the pit.
But very quickly, people started questioning whether the show was laughing with its cast, or simply laughing at them. From the beginning, critics accused Redneck Island of turning Southern culture into a cartoon. The beer-guzzling, thick accents, non-stop roughhousing, and endless focus on reckless behavior weren't just moments on the show, they were its entire identity.
I'm not sure if that's gonna work, considering the rope is 150 pounds and 70 feet long.
Media outlets even coined the term Hicksploitation to describe this wave of reality TV, arguing that networks were cashing in by exaggerating rural stereotypes for entertainment. Some reviewers pointed out how proudly the contestants seemed to embrace being reduced to caricatures, as if being loud, drunk, and chaotic had become the only version of themselves television cared to show. And culturally uncomfortable as that was, the creative side wasn't exactly impressive either.
Come on, Josh, find your second wind. You can do it!
We are failing at this.
Several critics openly mocked Redneck Island as a barely disguised Survivor knockoff, just with cheaper production values, fewer strategy elements, and more beer. One review joked that the remote island setting looked less like a survival location and more like a beach where you could probably buy fireworks and drinks just off camera. The message was clear. This wasn't innovation, it was a proven reality TV formula dressed up in camouflage.
It's time to find out who is one step closer to winning the prize. Jeremy and Shelby?
While fans were still tuning in, the wider industry was flooding the market with similar shows, each one chasing louder chaos, bigger stunts, and the same exaggerated Southern stereotypes. What once felt fresh quickly turned into overkill, and Redneck Island was no longer unique, just one loud voice in a crowded room of copy-paste reality concepts.
Boy and Margaret we can throw in, and we also got Becky and Tank.
Right now, we have to be very, very careful with this move.
Behind the scenes, the manufactured nature of the show also began to peek through. Contestants later admitted that producers had the power to shape them into characters through editing, often exaggerating traits to fit the narrative. Riley Green, who would later rise to fame as a country music star, revealed that the show edited him into a non-stop party animal, even labeling him a career drinker, a portrayal that frustrated his family and didn't reflect who he actually was. Moments like that reminded audiences that Redneck Island wasn't raw or authentic chaos. It was controlled chaos, carefully produced to push stereotypes, drama, and outrageous moments as far as possible. And as seasons went on, that need to outdo itself became obvious in the challenges. What began as goofy competitions slowly escalated into bigger, faster, and more dangerous stunts, as if each season was trying to scream louder than the last.
At 100 grams.
These new kids have no idea what they're in for.
Massive slip and slide runs replaced simple mud games, beer-based challenges grew more extreme, and one infamous stunt even left a contestant injured, shifting the tone from silly fun to something reckless and uncomfortable. Around the same time, the entire redneck reality genre was facing a wake-up call. Tragedies on similar shows sparked national conversations about whether these programs were encouraging dangerous behavior just for entertainment. A cast member from MTV's Buck Wild, another Southern party-themed reality series, died in an off-roading accident, leading to massive backlash in the show's cancellation. While Redneck Island avoided disasters on that scale, the shadow of those events changed how audiences looked at these types of shows. Suddenly, the chaos no longer felt harmless, it felt exploitative. Even within the Redneck Island community, somber moments broke through the party atmosphere. Former contestant Nick Honea tragically passed away in an accidental carbon monoxide poisoning incident, reminding fans that the people on screen weren't just outrageous characters, but real individuals with lives far beyond the show.
12 seasoned competitors from Redneck Island. We'll fight it out with...
As all of this was happening, something else was quietly killing Redneck Island: burnout. TV executives openly admitted that Southern-themed reality shows had saturated the market. The novelty wore off, audiences grew tired of the same formula, and CMT tried to keep Redneck Island fresh by changing locations, adding celebrity co-hosts, and bringing back veteran contestants. But those changes felt less like evolution, and more like a last attempt to keep the party going after everyone was already heading home. Online reactions shifted from genuine excitement to ironic enjoyment. Viewers still watched, but increasingly as a guilty pleasure or a meme-worthy spectacle rather than something they truly cared about. Redneck Island slowly transformed from a celebration into something people laughed at for being ridiculous. By the time the final seasons aired, the show wasn't riding a cultural wave anymore. It was clinging to the tail end of a fading trend. There was no massive scandal, no explosive cancellation, just a quiet loss of momentum.
And called me a bitch. I said it to your face.
Never said I was! promoted you. Don't push up on me, mother.
And in 2016, after its 5th season, Redneck Island disappeared almost without notice. Another reality series that burned bright during a fad and faded once that fad finally died. The collapse wasn't dramatic, it was inevitable. Looking back at Redneck Island today, it doesn't just feel outdated. It feels like a textbook example of what happens when reality TV chases shock value instead of building something sustainable. The biggest problem was built directly into the concept. Redneck Island wasn't designed to evolve. Unlike shows like Survivor or The Challenge, which survived by focusing on strategy and human dynamics, its entire appeal rested on spectacle. Loud behavior, extreme stunts, exaggerated personalities,
Hey, baby!
We're almost to the big steps, baby. Grandma.
and the constant recycling of stereotypes were the engine of the show. Once audiences got used to that chaos, there was nowhere left to go. Every new season had to be bigger, wilder, and more outrageous, not because the story demanded it, but because shock was the only tool the format had. And when shock becomes routine, it stops being exciting and starts feeling forced. Another major issue was how heavily the show depended on turning real people into simplified characters. It wasn't just a competition show, it was the competition show of the early 2000s redneck reality boom. So when that trend cooled off, the series had no separate identity to fall back on. Once networks and viewers moved on to the next big thing, Redneck Island simply faded with it. And over time, what once felt like celebration started to feel more like exploitation. The show claimed to empower rural culture, but in practice it focused almost entirely on the most exaggerated and chaotic stereotypes. Hardworking Southern life rarely made it on screen. Instead, viewers saw nonstop drinking, reckless stunts, and loud behavior presented as the defining traits of an entire community. As media conversations evolved, that kind of representation aged poorly.
Toughest challenges yet.
Today, Redneck Island isn't remembered as great television. It's remembered as a bizarre time capsule. Clips don't circulate because people miss it. They circulate because people can't believe it existed. The show now lives mostly as a meme, a nostalgia joke, and a reminder of how quickly reality TV trends can spiral into absurdity. Ultimately, Redneck Island failed because it confused loudness with longevity. It believed bigger stunts could replace meaningful storytelling. It treated culture as a gimmick instead of something with depth. And once the shock wore off, there was nothing left but muddy footage, tired stereotypes, and a format that had completely run out of steam. Redneck Island wasn't destroyed by scandal. It was quietly exposed by time. In the end, Redneck Island wasn't a total failure. For a brief moment in the early 2000s, it tapped into something real. It gave viewers who rarely saw themselves on television a show built around their culture, their humor, and their lifestyle, creating genuine excitement and even launching a future country music star along the way. On the surface, it looked like a fun, rowdy celebration of everyday America, but underneath the mud, beer, and patriotic branding, the fantasy was always fragile. Redneck Island depended on exaggeration more than authenticity, on shock more than storytelling, and on turning culture into spectacle instead of exploring it with depth. It rose because novelty made it feel fresh, and it fell because novelty never lasts. Once the redneck reality boom burned itself out, the show was left exposed as just another trend-driven experiment that couldn't survive without the hype that created it. No amount of bigger challenges or returning fan favorites could save a format built almost entirely on chaos. In hindsight, Redneck Island perfectly represents reality TV's endless cycle.
In the end, only the strongest will survive. Who will win?
Networks discover a trend, push it hard, oversaturate it, and quietly move on when audiences get tired. Today, the show exists mostly as a bizarre time capsule, something people stumble across online and react to with disbelief and laughter. Not because it was groundbreaking, but because it was television chasing extremes. The fantasy almost worked. For a few seasons, it even thrived. But in the end, it proved that turning real culture into a gimmick can only last so long before the party finally runs out of beer. So pour one out for Redneck Island, another reality show that burned bright, burned fast, and quietly disappeared when the trend that created it finally died. And if you enjoyed this breakdown of reality TV's wildest rises and falls, make sure to like, subscribe, and tell us which show should be put out of its misery next. Because at Buzzkill TV, there's always another reality fantasy waiting to collapse.